Hello and welcome to Product Photography. My name is Hannah and I will be assisted by my chat facilitator, Caitlin, today. Say hi, Caitlin.
Hello.
Right. So today we will be covering how to set up, shoot, and then edit product photos. This class is bordering on a beginning to intermediate level, so we will not be going into extreme detail about camera settings, technical aspects, or tools. If you find yourself lost, a recording will be sent out of this program and recommended tutorials will be displayed at the end of class. We will be using Adobe Photoshop to edit photos, but there are some free alternatives such as Photopea if you do not have access to Photoshop. But currently all libraries have a public computer with Adobe Creative Cloud, so you can edit your photos for free at any of our locations. All righty, let's get started. Any questions so far, Caitlin?
No, we're doing good.
All right. So a basic class overview is we're going to look at setting up the shot, the supplies that you need. Then we're going to focus on lighting, one of the most important aspects of product photography and photography in general. And then the end of the lesson will be photo editing in Photoshop. Some supplies you're going to need is obviously a camera, either a DSLR or a smartphone. We'll focus on that in the next slide. Then you're going to need some lighting. We're going to talk about natural lighting versus artificial. We're going to talk about 2 versus 3-point lighting and using a diffuser. And lastly, you're going to need a background, either a white bed sheet, some butcher paper, or some other interesting materials you might have laying around your house. For the cameras, a DSLR is a digital single lens reflex. It's one of those fancy big cameras with the big lens on there. The pro of using a camera like this is obviously superior photo quality. You can adjust a lot of settings on the camera itself to get the shot just right. But the cons are it is expensive and these cameras have a bit beefier of a learning curve. Your other alternative is smartphones. Pro is easy to use. Most people do have a smartphone or something similar laying around. The cons, of course, is it may lack some photo quality, not as, higher res of an image than you would get with a DSLR. But I will show you in class today some photos taken with a smartphone and some photos taken with the DSLR so that you can kind of see the difference and see that it is possible to get some quality product photos with a smartphone. Alrighty, lighting. It is one of the most, if not the most important aspect of photography. Now, natural lighting versus artificial lighting. I prefer to shoot with natural lighting whenever I take photos of products, of people, of places, just because it's, in my opinion, a little bit easier to work with, and it usually produces higher photos for me personally. If you're going to be shooting with natural lighting in your home, I recommend to shoot near windows with diffused light. So that means it's not a direct ray of light hitting your product, which can cause intense glares and shadows. So you would have light kind of coming in through a window, but you're not shooting in that light, you're shooting near it. Do not shoot in direct light because it just causes some real funky photos. You have to shop out the shadows and the glares, and it can get really messy. For artificial lighting, it's more than possible to get some very quality photos. Just make sure you pay attention to, like, let's say if you're choosing some areas in your home to take photos in. If you're shooting in the kitchen, if you look up at the fluorescent bulbs in your kitchen, they're most likely a blue light. So there's all sorts of color temperature whenever you look at light bulbs. A blue light is usually fluorescence or LEDs. They cast a blue tone on your photos. Whereas if you have a bedstand or nightstand lamp, it most likely has a yellow tint to that light bulb. So it casts a yellow glow. Whatever you shoot with in your home, whatever lamps you can find, you don't have to have a fancy photo setup like pictured here with the green screen. Just choose some lamps around your home. Just make sure that the bulbs are all roughly the same color temperature. So if you have a bunch of blue bulbs hanging out in your home or your apartment, use all of those. Don't mix and match with yellow light bulbs and blue light bulbs, because that makes it kind of funky to edit in the post process. And we're going to move on to 2 and 3 point lighting, and I'll explain why I think it's the best. Any questions so far, Caitlin? Am I going too fast?
No, so far so good.
All right. So next you're going to need a background to shoot against. For a home setup, I would recommend using a white bed sheet or a piece of paper, depending on how big your product is. I recommend butcher paper because that's much bigger. But if you are using a bed sheet, please iron the bed sheet out beforehand, because I did not, and I made a lot more work for myself in post. And try using different materials to shoot against. So go outside, check around in your garden for some stones, some bark, check in your closet for textured fabric, some really funky t-shirts you haven't worn in a while, because shooting against, not typical fabric can yield some really interesting results. And for your background, just check out what other lamps and other sources of light you have in your home or your apartment, windows, lamps, all that fun stuff. This was the office setup that I did, where I had access to some butcher paper and I had access to some softbox lights. So it made it a lot easier for me with that butcher paper because there was no wrinkles, no tears. It was a pretty nice setup. I liked that one a lot. Just another example of my office setup, the different angles that I made with it. And if you're using butcher paper or a sheet, make sure you hang it up and you kind of have it go in a curve. I don't know if you can see that too well in this photo, but the background backdrop curves a little bit, so there's no harsh seam. There's no fold in the paper whenever you hang it up, and it makes the background look infinite and flawless. These are some examples of some different props and backgrounds you can use. So I had in the lower left photo just white butcher paper for a watch. Yeah, it looks good. It just shows the product. I'm not super impressed with it. On the lower right, I found some green fabric. I felt like it made the brown leather of the watch band really pop. It complements it. And then I found a kind of a burlap sack material that was rough, and I felt like it really paired up well with the green and the brown of the watch strap. So it makes the watch strap look nice and soft and makes the watch face look really sleek. So playing with different colored fabric and different types of fabric and materials can just make it look really interesting. So 2 and 3 point lighting, why I think it is an awesome concept to explore. So 2 point lighting means there are 2 sources of light. 3 point lighting, same thing, 3 sources of light. An example that I made with this cool little mannequin thing, I had just 1 source of light in this left-hand photo, and you'll see there's a glare on the mannequin on its arm, and then you get this harsh shadow, which that's normally cool in photography. Whenever you have just 1 source of light, it's very dramatic and serious and artistic. But for product photography, I want to portray the product I am displaying or selling as accurately and as realistic as possible, just because I don't want to, if I'm selling something online, I don't want to misrepresent the product that I'm selling because buyers might be disappointed. So then on this right-hand photo, I had two sources of light, and it evens out that shadow incredibly. It really evens out the glares. If you notice, because a trick to how you can tell if there are one or two or even three sources of light. So if you look on the second photo, there's one shadow, two shadows. So if you just count the shadows, that's one way to tell how many sources of light are in a photo.
And we have a question about
Yes.
Are shadows a definite flaw? Are they a good thing in photos?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Are shadows really a no-no? Are they something bad in product photos?
It's a personal choice. I tend to err on the side of less shadows and less dramatic photos and more neutral, because for product photography, if you're selling a product online, usually you just want to have your product be represented as accurately as possible. And sometimes shadows can distract from that and glares can distract from that, but it is, you know, an artistic preference at the end of the day. I just prefer to have very neutral photos with very minimal shadows, if that makes sense. Any follow-up on that?
None at the moment, but thank you.
Yes, let me know if there's any follow-up. I will happily stop my rambling and answer what I can. Okay. This is an example of 1, 2, and 3-point lighting. So I had 1 point on this upper left photo, and there's some, you know, shadows on the side. The shadows on the wrinkles of the bed sheet are really prominent. And the glass on these binoculars it's not really popping, if that makes sense. I want to show that feature off. So then I brought a second light out. I had a little portable box light, and I put it in the front, and I was like, okay, that's all right, but I'm still getting some shadows in the back. And I noticed that there was quite the glare on the glass lenses. So I brought out a third light, put it on top, hanging above the binocular set. I still had my first light over here on the left. And then for the box light that I had, I put a piece of paper over the front of it, and it acted as a diffuser. So it made the light softer. So that way there's no intense glare or reflection. It's a little bit softer in that glass. A word of caution: if you are putting paper or fabric over a lamp or a light bulb, please keep an eye on it, because I don't want you to, you know, burn your house down taking some product photos. It's not worth it. So just keep that in mind. This is the same setup, but with a DSLR. So same dealio over here. One light is just kind of dark, two, better. Then I brought in three with a diffuser, and it really just made the metal shine, but not glare. It just looks a lot better, in my opinion, than the 1 or 2 point setup. All right, we are to the editing portion. And let me know if you guys have any questions as I'm going through this process, because we are here to answer those. Okay, we're going to start with the cell phone photos, because I want to show you guys that it is possible to get quality photos out of a cell phone. You don't have to have a fancy DSLR. It does make the editing process a little bit easier and a little bit smoother, but you can definitely accomplish quality product photos with just your cell phone. I go here, and let's do mannequin. All right, so first things first, I'm going to crop this photo because I took it, I think, in full mode on my cell phone, And I want to make sure I can crop this big old shadow out down here. So I'm going to go over to the toolbar on the left, and this little guy right here is the crop tool, keyboard shortcut of C as in cat. Select that. This little frame appears, and I'm going to go up here where it says ratio up on the options bar. This options bar will change based on whatever tool you have selected. So if I selected the lasso tool, it changes. I'm gonna go back to that crop tool and I'm gonna select ratio. And let's do a 2:3 ratio. Or if you are posting to Instagram or something similar, they do have a 1:1 square, which is very convenient. So now the frame has shrunk, and I'm gonna click and drag to see if I can get rid of that shadow. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, that's looking much better. Whenever you are happy with your selection after just click and dragging it around, select this little check mark up here. That will finalize your selection. I'm going to zoom in with Z as in zombie on my keyboard. I'm going to click and drag. Yes, much better. That's some good framing. And even though I got the lighting pretty good on this, I do see some wrinkles up here that I feel distract from my product I wish to sell. So I'm going to go over here and select the clone stamp tool with the keyboard shortcut of S as in Sam. How the clone stamp tool works is it needs to rewrite the pixels that make up this photo, those little tiny squares. It needs to rewrite them directly. So to do this, you're supposed to paint on a background layer, but I don't like to paint on the original background layer just because sometimes I mess up in Photoshop and I don't want to have to start over from scratch if I mess up real bad. So I'm going to right click background over here. I'm going to select duplicate layer. And if you are editing a lot of layers and doing some fancy stuff with your photos, definitely name your layers appropriately, but I'm just going to keep it as background copy. Select OK. And if you notice, this layer does not have a little lock on it, because even Photoshop tries to stop you from making some big errors by editing the background layer directly. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit with Z. Okay, good. If you're zoomed in on a photo and you don't want to have to keep scrolling or using the bars down here, you can hold the space bar while you are zoomed in and the little hand appears and you can just click and drag wherever you want to go in that photo. All right, back to the clone stamp tool, keyboard shortcut of S as in Sam. I'm going to make sure the brush that I have for this clone stamp tool is nice and soft. So let's see here. I went into general brushes, soft and round, awesome. Oops. And a trick with the clone stamp tool is if you're making some big changes in here, you want your brush to be fairly big and fairly soft. So I did the soft round. And I'm going to bump down the opacity just a little bit and the flow. That's going to make this a very nice and soft brush. So the changes that I make won't be too glaring. They'll just be kind of sneaky. They'll blend in. So with my clone stamp tool selected, I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard and a little bullseye appears. That is the computer, we're telling Photoshop, hey, we want you to sample from this area that has no wrinkles and use that to paint over the wrinkled area. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to hold Alt, little bullseye appears, and then I'm going to left click once. Then I let go of the keyboard. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little cross that appears where I was sampling. And I'm just clicking and dragging. And I am essentially painting over those wrinkles. I recommend you resample quite often because if you are over here Oh no, I'm actually using the mannequin to paint and you don't want that. So Control Z to undo. I'm going to resample a little bit closer to the wrinkles. So I'm holding Alt, left click once, and I'm just clicking very lightly, doing small little brush strokes to get rid of those wrinkles. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to zoom out. Much better. Those wrinkles are gone. If you go over to your layers panel and select this little eyeball, you can see the before and the after. So let's zoom in a little bit. Before, after. Much better. Less distracting. Looks great. I don't think this photo needs any color editing. I feel like I got the color temperature pretty consistent. So I would say this photo is done. So in order to save that, I go up to File. You can do Export. I just do Save As. Save on your computer. And JPEG. We're going to do Desktop. I always like to differentiate my final photos by saying edited or final. Save. And I always save as maximum quality. Okay. That's our first cell phone photo already done. I feel like I did a good job lighting it, so it wasn't too terribly much work. Any questions so far before we dip into our second cell phone photo?
No, ma'am.
All righty. Now this next photo is a little bit more work. I will say I did not get it super, super great. So let's do 3-point binoculars. Now this is what I warn everyone participating to please iron your sheet. I did not iron this one, so it's going to be a lot more work, but I want to show you how it's done. First things first, I'm going to crop this photo because I kind of shot, a little bit with too much space over here. I want to have this product pretty dead center. So I'm going to select the crop tool, keyboard shortcut of C. And let's do, yeah, 2x3 again. And I'm gonna swap this little arrow set right here to make it a landscape photo. I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit. Let's see, click and dragging just to get nice and centered with that piece. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to select that little check mark. All right, much better. And it's less editing to do in that little blank area. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to just increase the brightness of this white sheet because there's wrinkles or shadows. You can kind of see the fabric. So there's two ways to do this. I'm going to select the Lasso Tool for the first one, keyboard shortcut of L as in love. And how the Lasso Tool works is you're telling Photoshop, I want you to select exactly what I am drawing around. So I'm just click and dragging. And the thing is, you have to make your selection a complete shape. And this is a very difficult part of the Lasso Tool. So you don't have to get it perfect the first time. I'm just drawing with a mouse, but you want to meet up with your origin point. So I started in the upper right of this binocular set, and I'm going to meet up with that origin point where I started. If you don't, Photoshop is going to try and guess where you meant to go, and it's not super great at guessing. All right, so I just let go of my mouse and you see these little lines that are moving. Those are called dancing ants, by the way. I think that's always just such a treat. And let's see, I missed a little bit of the back part of the binocular. So I'm gonna hold Shift on my keyboard while I have the Lasso Tool selected. And a little plus appears on my mouse, and I'm gonna click and drag. All right. And if you notice, it added that to the selection. Down here, I'm going to zoom in. Down here, I was just a little sloppy with selecting pretty flush with that metal. So my lasso tool selected, I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard and a little minus appears. So I'm just going to click and drag and try and get that a little bit closer. And it takes away from your selection. So Shift adds to your selection and Alt subtracts from your selection. So you don't have to get your selection right and perfect the first time. You can go in and edit later. So I'm just going to clean some of this up. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe I'll clean this up a little bit over here. I'm just holding minus. I'm sorry, I'm holding Alt on the keyboard and it subtracts from my selection. Okay. So with my lasso tool selected, I'm going to right click. And to make this selection, I'm going to select inverse because I want to whiten the background to kind of get rid of some of these wrinkles and make the background kind of pop. So I selected inverse, and then I'm going to select feather. Feather basically softens the edge of your selection. So right where this metal frame is, it's going to soften it so that the transition isn't as stark or glaring. You want to make sure you have a feather radius that complements your photo because, you know, if you have a really high res photo, you can feather it a little bit higher. But for my cell phone photos, I'm going to keep it at about 5 to 10 pixels. So let's see what 10 looks like. I'm going to select OK. I'm going to go over to adjustments over here. And I'm going to select, let's see, let's do brightness first. I'm just going to brighten that up. And already you see kind of the some of the fabric disappearing. Let me see what no contrast does. Nothing much. Okay, let me brighten that just a little bit more. And that looks good. That looks much better. So before and after. And I want to make that same selection again, but I don't want to have to redraw it. So I just go over to this little layers panel over here. And this little box, very tiny, I'm going to right click it, add mask to selection. And what we're going to do is I'm going to make a copy of the background again. And this time I'm going to go up to filter and we're going to apply a Gaussian blur. The blur will help get rid of more of these little gritty fabric pieces. Very nice. Make it a little bit more neutral. You don't want to go too overboard because then it just makes it look super photoshopped and fake. But you know, keeping it real. Here we go. That looks pretty good. It makes it so the background does not distract from your product. You want your product to be in the forefront. You don't want a distracting or complicated background. I think that looks pretty good. I'll left click anywhere to get rid of those dancing ants. Oh yes, much better. That was before, that's after. Now we're going to dip into some color editing because if you look at a photo and you notice there's a yellow tone, such as right here, because I mixed color temperatures in this shoot. I had a little bit more of a white or blue light over here. And then I had, I think, a hallway light that was a little bit yellow. So I'm gonna go over here. I have my lasso tool already selected. And I'm going to click and drag and just select this rough area. Meet up with the origin point kind of. Because I see a little bit of yellow right in there. The rest over here is pretty nice and, you know, neutral to blue. So I have my area selected. I'm going to right click, feather. I'm going to keep it at 10. I feel like that's a nice soft border. Select OK. Go back to adjustments. And this time I'm going to select these little scales right here. And they say color balance. So just to remove the yellow out of a photo, I just move away from yellow on this little bar. Just add some blue. I might add a little bit of cyan. And that looks much better. I know this is all pretty subtle changes, but you're going to notice whenever you're looking at product photos if there's a yellow light or a blue light or mixed lights. So let's see, before, after. Very nice. Yeah, I would say that one is done. So once again, you would just go to File, Save As, Save on your computer. I usually just do JPEG, and then I rename it, save it. You're good to go. All right, that's it for our cell phone portion. We're going to move on to the DSLR portion. If anybody has any questions, you just put them in chat. I am here for that. Oh, wait, before I move on, actually, I'm going to turn all these edits on that are off that I have done. The alternate way to selecting stuff in a photo, which I just found out about this, is the object selection tool right below the lasso tool. I don't know why I'm whispering. This is just very secret information. So select this tool. You can also right click and select it if it's not readily available. So this tool is going to guess what you mean to select. And if you only have one object in your photo, it's going to do a pretty good job. So I just click and dragged it. Let's see, it's thinking. Oh boy, did I break Photoshop? Here we go. And look, it drew it for me. I just found that out. It's magical. Oh, so once again, that was the object selection tool right below the lasso tool. Object selection, click and drag, and it will make that selection for you. I usually have to go in and clean it up just a little bit, but 9 times out of 10, it does a pretty decent job. Okay, on to the DSLR photos. Okay. So let's see here. Let's do 3-point. So in this photo, you can probably see that I shot in very, very blue light. I was not paying attention with what I was shooting with on the camera, what light mode. So we're going to fix this right up. Let's go ahead and dip into some color correction. So we're going to go back to adjustments and we're going to go back to color balance. And I'm just going to scoot that little bar over to yellow. And there is also an option to just type in a value over here. I found out that -24 looked pretty good on the midtones. And the highlights you can select from this tone option right here. It's just another way to customize your photo and the colors in it. So let's do -28. Oh, yes, that looks much better. So I like to look at the product in front of me, you know, in my hand, and then whenever I have the photo on the computer screen, and I like to just look back and forth between the two and try to get it to match as accurately as possible, colors and all. So that was before, very, very blue. After, much more neutral. I really don't need to edit the background at all. I shot on butcher paper with this one, and there are no wrinkles, no tears. Butcher paper is where it's at. Okay, that one is dunsies. let's open up, let's see. I really like this corner angle picture. Whenever you are listing something online, it's good to have some different alternate angles of your product so they really know what, the buyer really knows what they are purchasing. So same dealio with this one, definitely very blue. So I'm gonna go back to color balance. And for the midtones, let's see, I'm gonna do, once again, like a -24. And highlights, let's do -28. Now it looks much better overall, but I think I was wearing a brightly colored shirt that day, and that is a big no-no in photography in general. You want to make sure whatever clothes you are wearing there as neutral as possible. So do, you know, some dark black clothes, brown, tan, beige, neutral stuff like that. Never wear yellow, orange, red, because it will reflect in your photography. So to fix this error, I'm going to go back over to my lasso tool, keyboard shortcut of L, select that. And this yellow area over here, I'm just going to click and drag just to select, oops, this little area. I'm going to clean up my selection by holding Alt on my keyboard. Click and dragging. Okay, good. It's a little bit more flush with the yellow area. So I'm going to right click, then my selection. I'm going to do feather. And let's see what pen looks like. I'm going to do OK. I'm going to go back to adjustments and color balance. All right, let's slide away from that yellow. We're going to add some blue. Already much, much better. I'm going to add some cyan. Ah, yes, that looks very, very nice. This was a before and after. Before and after. Much better, because on the binocular set, there is no yellow. That was my mistake whenever I was wearing a brightly colored shirt or pants or something, and it reflected on the product. So I want to make sure the product is as accurately represented as possible in my photos. Okay, if there are any people who are interested in hosting jewelry that they have made, we're going to focus on a watch next. Kind of the same-ish concept as if you have a bracelet or a ring, something like that. Let's see here. Let's do watch on green background. Let's see. All right, for this photo, I shot super dark. I don't know what happened, but we can fix that by going over to adjustments, clicking the brightness / contrast little sun icon, and just dragging that up. Maybe just a little bit down. You can play with the contrast a little bit. Just make sure it's not too dramatic. Okay. Very nice. I will say in this photo, it's very saturated. If, let's see, like the greens look very green. I'm looking at the watch in my hand and it's not quite as colorful or rich, if that makes sense. And I don't want to misrepresent my product. So I'm going to desaturate this photo. I think the camera I was shooting on was just had a very heavy color profile attached to it, and it applied a lot of saturation to this photo. So to desaturate, I'm going to go back to adjustments, and I'm going to go to hue and saturation. It's right next to color balance. I'm going to select hue and saturation, and I'm just going to bump the saturation down a little bit. Not too much. You don't want it to be sad or depressing or dramatic, but I think that looks a little bit more accurate. The brown isn't as orange as it was before. So we have a before, after. The greens definitely look a little bit more accurate to what I have in front of me. So I think that looks pretty good. I would say this photo's already done because I don't feel the need to edit the background. There's no wrinkles. I like having some angled photos of my products just to provide a little bit of an artistic flair. So let's go ahead, we'll call that one done. And let's do, oh yes, watch on burlap. This kind of shows that lovely rough texture against smooth leather and metallic reflective surface. It makes the product look sleek and new. That's why I just love shooting against some different textures and materials. Let's see here. I think this one is a little bit saturated, sadly. It looks great, but it's not super accurate. So I'm going to go back to adjustments and go back to hue and saturation. And just bump it down a little bit, just a smidge, -5. Yeah, subtle changes. And I do notice that there is some distracting fuzz. Maybe I'm just nitpicky, but I feel like some of the fuzz up here distracts from the photo. It kind of pulls away your attraction to the product itself. And I, kind of follows, oh, there's a fuzz there. There's some fuzz up here. So we're going to use that clone stamp tool again to just lessen them or help these little fuzzes just disappear. So keyboard shortcut of S as in Sam. I still have a very nice soft brush. We might change that depending on how this goes. So I'm going to zoom in to this little fuzzball right here. And let's see, I am on the background layer. I'm going to make a copy of it. So right click, duplicate layer. Okay. And let's make sure that my little brush diameter is a little bit bigger than the fuzz itself, because if it's too small, it'll turn out real funky. So I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard and I'm going to get kind of close to the fuzz because I want to make sure the shadow and the blur of the camera lens, everything kind of matches the area, because I can't sample from way up here. It's too light. Can't sample from way down here. It's a little bit too dark. So I want to make sure it's pretty close to that fuzz. Hold Alt, left click once, and yeah, that lessens it. I'm going to do it again. Click a couple times, and that fuzz is gone. Before, after, before, and after. Let's go up here to these little strands, these distracting strands. Keyboard shortcut of S to bring up your clone stamp tool. I'm going to hold Alt, and this time I'm going to sample up here with this little blurry green. So Alt, left click, and I might make my brush diameter just a little bit smaller. You can do that by going up to the options bar and dragging it down, but I prefer to just use the bracket keys on my keyboard. Left bracket makes it smaller, right bracket makes it bigger. So Alt, left click, let's go up here. Just gonna slowly paint that out. You can make your brush a little bit harsher, a little bit more stark of a change. Oops. And Alt left click, just makes it a little bit more intense of a change, which sometimes the situation calls for that. And I'm just Alt left clicking, I'm resampling a lot. It helps add to the kind of natural look of your photo. Okay, before, after, much better. People aren't, distracted by the little strands up there or the fuzzes down there, so you're good to go. Okay, I think we might have enough time to dip into a photo of a painting. So if you guys have any questions about any of this process, please let me know. Let's see here. Paintings, in my opinion, are very difficult to get a good photo of. It's just not my specialty as a photographer, but it is possible. It's pretty difficult, in my opinion, to get pictures of paintings because there are going to be some glares. So down here, you notice there's a glare. It's from the softbox lighting that I was using. It was pretty close. And it's kind of hard to get a good angle on the painting itself, a good photo of it. So I had this painting laying flat on its surface. I had the lights above it and to the side, and I just got up on a step stool and I shot downward. You can also try and shoot it dead on by like leaning it up against a wall, but it gets difficult with the angles whenever those come into play. I will say adding bits of props to your photos of your paintings serves two purposes. One, it looks cool and it can kind of add to the painting itself. So I got some twine and some colorful brushes and you know, all sorts of fun stuff. And I placed them directly onto the painting itself because it can kind of act as a pseudo watermark or a water stamp so that people can't, or it makes it a lot more difficult for them to steal your artwork online. So it's kind of like a real life water stamp that kind of adds to the classiness of your photo. So let's go ahead, we'll crop. I already have a 2x3 selected, so I'm just going to pull that in. Pull that in. There we go, a little bit more. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit. Okay. And that looks good. Let me move that out of the way. Up. Plus. Okay, that looks great. Let's see here. I shot a little bit darker in this photo. So I was looking at the painting in real life. I shot a little bit darker because the glare was very intense down here whenever I had a bunch of lights going. So let's see here. Adjustments, brightness and contrast. I'm just gonna drag that up a bit, make it a little more vibrant. There we go. That's looking a lot more accurate. And I see that there's like a little bit of a color profile here. I'm just gonna play with it in color balance till it looks just right. I think I shot with a little bit of blue. So I'm just gonna add a scoosh of yellow and a little bit of red. Yes, very nice. It looks a lot more golden now in there than it did before. And color matching paintings in real life is very, very difficult because you want to be, you know, accurate to the artist if you are the artist as well. And you just want to make sure it matches as much as possible. And let's see. I might try to take out some of that glare with the clone stamp tool. So let me make a copy of the background. I'm going to hold Alt right above where I'm painting, as accurate as possible, right above it. A little bit better. A little bit better. Okay, this is improving. Hold on, that one's a little bit funky. Hold Alt, left click, just go directly down. It's very challenging trying to get it to line up with those lines just perfectly. Let's see, Alt left click, just clicking away. And if you notice, I kind of made the border a little fuzzy down here. So I'm gonna select E as in egg on my keyboard. And I'm just gonna go right flush up against that painting. This is the eraser tool. And I'm kind of creating a harsher line. Very nice. So that's just kind of a way that you can get rid of glare. It is pretty difficult, but sometimes it looks better. Really, that is it for the basics of product photography. Are there any questions, anything at all that you guys would like to know?
There are no questions yet. Everyone should still
Okay. I'm going to keep on playing with this glare for just a couple more minutes. If there are any questions, please let me know. I am here to answer everything that I can. All right, I'm just erasing right up against that border. I'm going to continue my little glare work. Alt, left click. Very nice. Very good. Try over here, Alt, left click, go down. Very good. Alt, left click. It's just some good subtle changes that, so you don't distract from the original painting at all. A little tip with the eraser tool is if you have your eraser tool selected, you left click once here, you hold shift and you left click up here, it'll create a line that will connect your first point to your second point. So you don't have to, worry about hand erasing. You just click, hold shift, click. It'll make it real nice and crisp for you. Very good. Yep, looks good. A little before, after. Oh yes, much better. Much less apparent. If you shoot right the first time, it's a lot less work for you in post, but I just can't shoot right the first time, so that's okay. See, left click. Do that. Much better. Got to play around my little natural watermark here, that little piece of twine. Very good. There we go, lining that up. Perfect.
And we do have another question.
Yes.
So what button are you pushing when you are actually painting? Can you refresh our memory?
Yes, whenever I am painting with the clone stamp tool, I have keyboard shortcut S selected. And whenever I'm actually painting, so I do Alt, I hold Alt to sample, Alt and then left click. Then I let go of Alt. And then just to paint, I just click and hold the mouse. Click and hold. You'll see it's sampling from the center of the painting. I'm just click and holding. You can do multiple brush strokes, but it's just a left click of the mouse. Very good. Just Control Z out of that. Perfect. Very good question. No, this is looking much better, much better. A little touch up here. A little bit of a glare is distracting. Alt left click. Let me go a little bit. There we go. Very nice. Okay. All right, that pretty much does it for us today. Let me display this on the screen. Boop. These are some resources that you guys have for free with your Plano Public Library card. You get access to lynda.com. It might be called LinkedIn Learning at this point. It is a free resource with your card that has premium video tutorials taught by industry professionals, and they even have like exercise files you can work with. And it's great because the videos are divided up into very easily digestible courses. So you can kind of skip around. If you join in on one of the courses and you are kind of bored, you can kind of scroll down and select a different part of the lesson and work from there. So these are just a few of the tutorials that I recommend. And also a service that is available to you, Plano Library card holders, is called Book a Librarian. Currently, we are offering virtual Book a Librarians at this time. But if you are struggling with something in this course, we can set up a free 30-minute one-on-one virtual session where we help you a little bit more in depth. We aren't specialists per se, but we can kind of get you started in the right direction. If you're interested in filling out a Book a Librarian form, you can find it on our site, or you can just Google Plano Book a Librarian, fill out the form, and we contact you within 72 business hours, and we'll set up that 30-minute one-on-one session tutorial. It's not limited to Photoshop. It could be, genealogy related, some other software related, really whatever you need. As long as it's not rocket science, we will try to help you. Any final questions from anyone today? No, nothing.
Doesn't seem like there's anything else. Great job.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We are happy to be here and offer some virtual programs for you. Please check our calendar for more awesome programs like this, and follow us on social media. All right. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you next time.